Imagine a guy named Sam. He's been in a coma for 16 years. He can't move, he can't communicate, and to the naked eye, it seems like his conscious mind is just gone. But when scientists put Sam into an fMRI scanner and played him a suspenseful movie, something incredible happened. His brain activity spiked in the exact same patterns as healthy participants. Sam was actually following the plot. It's a wild story, and it perfectly highlights the ultimate hurdle in psychology. The human mind is completely hidden from view. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're putting together the ultimate exam prep guide to the history of cognitive psychology. We're going to trace the massive roller coaster, the rise, the fall, and the epic rebirth of how we scientifically study the mind. So grab your notebooks, because this is going to be an absolute lifesaver for your studies. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. We'll start by defining what cognitive psychology actually is. Then, we'll meet the early pioneers, cover the dark days of behaviorism, look at the scientific anomalies that challenge that blank slate model, and finally, explore the cognitive revolution.
Section 1. What is cognitive psychology? Defining the hidden mind.
So, back to that core problem we saw with Sam the coma patient. The mind is completely invisible. You can't just put a thought or a memory on a scale and weigh it, right? So, how do we actually define this for an exam? Well, the textbook definition is that cognitive psychology is the scientific study of the mind and mental processes. But pay close attention here, because it defines the mind in two very specific ways. First, functionally. It creates and controls mental functions like perception, attention, memory, and reasoning. Second, operationally. The mind creates representations of the world so that we can act within it to achieve our goals. Basically, think of it as an information processor, taking in the world and representing it so we can survive and thrive.
Section 2. The early pioneers, measuring the invisible.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the whole field got started. Before cognitive psychology was even an official field, we have to rewind back to the late 1800s. This was an era when a few brave, outside-the-box scientists first tried to quantify this totally unobservable thing we call the mind. You are almost guaranteed to see matching questions on these four key pioneers, so let's run through them. First, Francis Donders in 1868, who measured reaction time and gets credit for the very first cognitive experiment. Then we have Wilhelm Wundt in 1879, who founded the very first laboratory of scientific psychology using a method he called analytic introspection. Third is Hermann Ebbinghaus in 1885. He used nonsense syllables to create the savings curve, proving that memory and forgetting could actually be mathematically quantified. And finally, William James in 1890, who relied on personal observations of his own mind to write the very first psychology textbook.
Let's look a little closer at Donders for a second, because his logic is literally the foundation of all modern cognitive testing. Donders compared simple reaction time, like pressing a button the exact moment you see a light, with choice reaction time, like pressing the left button for a left light and the right button for a right light. He found that choice reaction time took about 1/10 of a second longer. So the crucial takeaway here? Donders proved that mental processing time cannot be measured directly. It has to be inferred from observable behavior. That principle right there is the beating heart of cognitive psychology.
Section 3. The reign of behaviorism. The dark ages of the mind.
By the early 20th century, the scientific community was getting incredibly frustrated with methods like Wundt's introspection. They found them way too subjective, and this triggered a massive paradigm shift. Psychologists basically decided to completely abandon the study of the invisible mind, leading to the era of behaviorism, championed by heavy hitters like John Watson and B.F. Skinner. Now, if you get an essay question on this, you absolutely need to list these three highly testable assumptions. Number 1, they believe the mind is a tabula rasa, a total blank slate at birth, with zero innate knowledge. Number 2, all learning stems purely from forming associations in the environment. And number 3, the most radical of all, the mind itself, your inner thoughts, your whole inner world, is totally irrelevant to explaining human psychology. They believe psychology should exclusively study observable inputs and outputs, period.
To explain all human learning without using the mind, behaviorists relied on two main mechanisms you must know. First is classical conditioning, discovered by Pavlov with his dogs, and popularized by Watson with his infamous Little Albert experiment. This is all about learning by pairing a neutral stimulus with an unconditioned stimulus to create an automatic reflex. Contrast that with operant conditioning, championed by B.F. Skinner. This dictates that behavior is controlled entirely by its consequences, positive or negative reinforcers. In other words, rewards and punishments. Skinner firmly believed this mechanism alone could explain literally everything we do.
Section 4. Challenging the blank slate. Anomalies in the behaviorist model.
For decades, behaviorism absolutely ruled the scientific landscape. But eventually, the cracks began to show. Researchers started noticing scientific anomalies, weird behaviors in the lab that simply couldn't be explained if the mind was just a blank slate shaped by rewards. First up, Tolman's rats. Tolman put rats in a maze and discovered they were finding food not just by memorizing a robotic sequence of left and right turns, but by developing internal cognitive maps, a mental layout of the entire maze. And this happened even without immediate rewards. No way behaviorism explains that. Then, the misbehavior of organisms. Researchers tried teaching raccoons to drop coins in a piggy bank for food, but instead the raccoons instinctively started rubbing the coins together like they were washing food. Their innate biological instincts totally overrode the operant conditioning. And finally, taste aversion. If a rat drinks weird-flavored water and gets sick hours later, it will never drink it again. That is one trial learning based entirely on evolutionary biology, totally defying the blank slate theory. But the absolute breaking point for behaviorism, that came down to a legendary academic showdown over human language. B.F. Skinner wrote an entire book claiming language is just verbal behavior, learned completely through operant conditioning. A kid says mom, gets a smile, and is rewarded. Simple. But then a linguist named Noam Chomsky published a devastating critique. Chomsky argued that kids constantly generate sentences they have never heard before, and they use incorrect grammar that was definitely never rewarded, like a kid saying, "I hitted the ball." Chomsky proved that language must be driven by an innate biological program and complex rule learning. You literally have to look inside the mind to understand language.
Let's move to Section 5 and see how this all builds up. The cognitive revolution, the rebirth of the mind.
So Chomsky's critique, combined with those maze rats and coin-washing raccoons, sparked a massive scientific revolution. It was finally time to bring the mind back into psychology. But they needed a new framework. How do you study something invisible? Well, the timing was perfect, because in the 1950s, a brand new technology arrived, the digital computer. This gave psychologists the ultimate metaphor, birthing the information processing approach. It was this massive light bulb moment, the realization that the human mind might process information in distinct stages: input, storage, processing, and output, just like a computer does. This finally allowed scientists to draw actual flow diagrams of human thought.
If you want to ace your exam, you need to understand exactly how quickly this revolution unfolded. Tracking this rapid-fire timeline, in 1948, Tolman discovers those cognitive maps in rats. In 1953, Colin Cherry uses the computer metaphor to study auditory attention, which you might know as the cocktail party effect. In 1956, historic conferences at MIT and Dartmouth essentially give birth to artificial intelligence and information theory. In 1959, Chomsky completely dismantles Skinner's blank slate view of language. And finally, in 1967, Ulrich Neisser publishes the first textbook officially titled Cognitive Psychology. Boom, the paradigm shift was complete.
Which brings us to modern cognitive psychology today. And wow, have we moved far past Donder's measuring reaction times with a light bulb? Today, researchers are creating incredibly detailed models of higher mental processes, mapping out the architecture of short-term and long-term memory. We use physiological mapping via fMRI, just like with Sam the coma patient, to literally watch the brain process information in real time. And we are taking this out of the lab and applying it in the real world, using virtual reality and augmented reality to study how prior knowledge actually influences our perception in fully immersive environments.
We've gone from believing the mind couldn't be studied, to dismissing it entirely, to mapping its exact neural pathways on a glowing screen. So I want to leave you with a provocative thought as you study this material. As our technology, things like AI, fMRI, and virtual reality, continues to accelerate at this breakneck pace, what will be the absolutely next paradigm shift in our understanding of the hidden mind? Keep that question in the back of your head as you prep for your exams. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Study hard, and I'll catch you next time.